Good afternoon and welcome to the first meeting of the Social Injustice Committee. Our panelists here today are Nadell Knowles, Kiera Lofton, Martasia Montgomery, Devontae Thompson, and I'm your host, Gloria Lyons. Today we're going to use the research that we performed to discuss an issue that has been plaguing our country: the discrepant emotions amongst American citizens surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement. Most, if not all of us, have either had our own personal run-ins with law enforcement and/or bore witness to others' encounters through the news and social media. These encounters seem to disproportionately result in physical altercations and elevate to the point of mortality in Black and African American communities, inciting the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, an organization whose purpose is to take a stand against police brutality against the people of color. In that purpose, some feel that Black Lives Matter is excluding other people. So let's discuss: is the Black Lives Matter movement discriminatory against people who are not Black or African American? Our first panelist is Nadell Knowles, who has done extensive research on the exact point and purpose of the Black Lives Matter movement. Nadell, can you share with us what you found in your research? Why exactly does Black Lives Matter exist?
Good evening. My name is Nadell Knowles, and I will be using the appeal of logos and ethos. I am a pro in this argument. I support the proposition because awareness of racism in America is severe, and it is critical that we know. Also, injustice in America is very much present, which makes the Black Lives Matter movement honorable. The Black Lives Matter movement has sprung knowledge and willpower to stand up for what is important. I know that the world will not be fixed in a day, but every conscious effort counts. I have had encounters with police officers that I know were not deemed bad guys, but sadly some are. We can't pick and choose who we come across, but we can most definitely determine how we choose to be respected. We will fight with justice, with honor, with grace. The Black Lives Matter movement is broadcasting the racism that is taking lives, which the public needs to be aware of. My two arguments: the Black Lives Matter movement is fighting against the injustice incurred from police officers. The Black Lives Matter movement is targeting the racist acts against Blacks in America. And now I will begin with my speech. Fighting for justice against injustice, raising awareness for a brighter future. This is what the Black Lives Matter movement eats and breathes. The sole purpose of the organization is to work until Americans can work together in hopes of a brighter future. Firstly, the Black Lives Matter movement is extremely monumental because of their strong will and determination to fight against police brutality in the U.S. Research states that the Black Lives Matter movement is fighting for injustice, according to www.blacklivesmatter.healingjustice.com. A quote: "Healing culture and spirit have always sustained us and informed our struggles for liberation." Also, the Black Lives Matter movement is not only fighting for the livelihood of just young Black Americans, but all minorities as well. There seems to be a misconception that the Black Lives Matter movement is strictly for Blacks and is also biased to law enforcement. False. No, the Black Lives Matter movement isn't anti-police nor discriminatory to white Americans, but strongly fighting for the equality of young Blacks as well as the citizens of this country. According to www.metrowestdailynews.com, the staff of the Greater Framingham Church state, "Black Lives Matter exists because it's something we need to survive. I'm not going to give the world as it is to my daughter. I'm not going to do it." This proves that not only the Black Lives Matter creating impact on all communities or ethnic groups, but also raising high-profile injustice in America. Furthermore, the Black Lives Matter movement has worked diligently to try and end the racism that is endured against blacks in America. The media has become a test trial of come and go news, but is biased on the essential storytelling as well as justice. According to www.theconversation.com, Black Lives Matter is a revolutionary. The Black Lives Matter movement is important because the Black Lives Matter is working for a world where black lives are no longer intentionally and systematically targeted for demise. The wrongdoing of an officer has become a sweep under the rug and is not analytical on why this particular ethnic group, blacks, seems to be faced with such adversity. It is extremely essential that we are keeping the main goal in sight, equality and justice for all. Lastly, with that being stated, the Black Lives Matter movement has and will continue to put their best foot forward in hopes of a better future.
Thank you, Nadell. We will now hear from Martasia Montgomery, a sophomore here at Virginia State University. As a criminal justice major and sociology minor, let's hear what her research brought her, and I'm curious as to what your insight is.
I was very enlightened to hear that your argument and position focus on fighting against racial injustice and raising attention to the racism in America. But now it's time to focus on the bigger picture. The Black Lives Matter movement is discriminatory against people who are not African American or black descent. First, let's look at why the Black Lives Matter movement started. According to Robinson, in 2015, it started in honor of an African American young male named Trayvon Martin. He was killed by a white man named George Zimmerman. Yes, I know this rings a bell. It is very important for the media to always raise awareness every time an African American male or female encounter police brutality or injustice from someone who is white or particularly a white officer. I'm here today to inform you that there are also other races who encounter police brutality and never get spoken about. The argument that I will be making today is police brutality is colorblinded of non-black. According to Downs, in 2016, as of today, 94 Latinos has died of police killings in 2016, making 16 of the 585 police killings. Based on statistics, 57,370 people were killed in 1 year. Young people and people of color were affected. 52% of all the years of life lost were lost by non-white, non-Hispanic ethnic groups. Whites also tended to be killed by police at older ages than African Americans and Hispanics. Though this is partially because in general, population whites and older on an average than the other groups. According to Lopez in 2018, racial minorities made up about 37.4% of the general population in the United States and 46.6% of armed and unarmed victims, but they made up 62.7% of unarmed people killed by police. Non-white Americans make up less than 38% of the U.S. population, yet almost half of all people killed by police is minority. I'm not just making this up, it's facts. Minorities make up almost 2/3 of unarmed people killed by police. How would you feel being a Hispanic mom losing your son over police brutality? And sometimes seek justice and sometimes don't. Take a quick second and put yourself in that woman's shoes. If you look at the data I have presented, you have to agree with me. Thank you for hearing my argument. My second argument will be why Black lives is discriminatory. Black lives is discriminatory because it only focuses on one race. That's why my proposition states that I am calm. According to the county, Hispanics are also killed by police. People like Jose Sanchez, 36 killed because he was shot, Abraham Ortiz, John Orvin, 28 killed and shot by police unarmed, and many, many, many more. These other races still matter. When a black man is killed by a cop, do we grieve more because there are 46 million of us as opposed to 98 million whites? I doubt it. Most Americans never hear about the white man's death at all. According to McChowder, how can we change the world to make the world a better place if we're still having to live in the past? It is proven true that Black lives matter, but what about the other races? Will Black lives matter if a black male was shot by another black male? Data shows that 93% of homicide victims are killed by other blacks, according to Aaron Bantler. My opponent said that Black Lives Matter focuses on racism. How is this true when blacks are discriminating against racism themselves by creating a group leaving out other races? Not only that, but only bringing attention when a white cop is involved.
Thank you, Martasia. Nabil, do you have a rebuttal?
Okay. So my rebuttal would be, yes, some may pin aggression against the Black Lives Matter movement, but it is not an act of aggression, but passion. If no one is willing to fight for our rights in this country, then who will? According to theconversation.com, the call for Black Lives Matter and for an end to state-sanctioned violence against black people, and by extension of all people, is fundamentally a call for peace. The kind of peace sought by the Black Lives Matter results from justice.
Thank you, Nabil. Martasia, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, I do. In closing, I wouldn't be on the calm side if I didn't feel that the issue did not need to be addressed. Sometimes people are overlooked. I think the movement is overlooked in many aspects. You can't scream equality and be a leader if you're not showing any actions by creating a group that only pays attention to one particular race. Although police brutality is brutal and something I do disagree on, we need to come to an understanding that the media plays a big role in what is happening today, and it's called mind games. Black people are not the only race constantly being killed. It's time that we look at the bigger picture, and change only happens if it starts with ourselves.
Thank you, Martasia. Now that we've heard both sides of this argument, a pro and a con, I have some questions for the panelists. Nabil, I'm going to start with you, and I want to know, did any of your research lead you to any information suggesting that Black Lives Matter doesn't care about the lives of non-black citizens?
Absolutely not. Actually, we have a source from theconversation.com where it says, healing culture and spirit have always sustained us and informed our struggles for liberation. The movement is not only fighting for the livelihood for just young black Americans, but all minorities as well. If that can answer your question, the movement is not only enforcing that blacks are important, but also Americans as well.
Thank you. Do you feel that it is possible for a protest or movement designed to combat a particular injustice towards a specific demographic to be labeled discriminatory? Do you feel it's possible for these organizations that are fighting specific purposes to be labeled discriminatory?
I feel that the organization wouldn't be deemed as discriminatory, but strictly fighting for a sole purpose, which would be injustice. Not for blacks, not for whites, for Americans. We're all equal, so that way, with this enforcement, I do not feel that a certain organization or group will be considered discriminatory because they're fighting for instance, Black Lives Matter. But there is research that states, for instance, the MetroWestDailyNews.com, where the staff of the Greater Framingham Church stated, a white man stated that he would not want his daughter to be brought up in this world. Now this was backed up because he's speaking on the behalf of the Black Lives Matter movement and why it is important, not only for blacks, but also the world itself, because there is other races out here that are going to need to coexist with black Americans, white Americans, Hispanic Americans. It's not just for one particular group. It's for all.
Thank you. Okay, Martasia, I have 2 questions for you as well. What do you think can be done to reduce encounters with law enforcement that result in death?
When I think about that question, I think there should be more police academies. I also think there should be community policing, but instead of policing, there should be separate, because one of the problems is we're not familiar with our police. There's certain police in different areas. I know I'm from Connecticut, so it's like certain police officers that's all the way from Farmington, Connecticut. I don't really know them, and we seem to have encounter it might be an argument, or it might be just something that's not unusual. And with that being said, I feel like there should be separate policing, and policing should be get more involved in the community. That way they will get to know us more, get to know some of the black kids, yeah.
Okay. And one more question. Do you feel that our current laws protect all races equally?
No, I do not feel that our current laws protect all races equally. Because if it did, we wouldn't have Black Lives Matter movement. We wouldn't have to fight for basically to not have our young kid or our young son, nephew walking down the street not doing anything, and boom, he's getting shot and killed. There wouldn't be that much deaths in the world, that much black deaths, that much Hispanic deaths, like I was talking about in my argument. And I also think that it doesn't protect, the laws doesn't protect the races, because when you look at the minorities and you look at now with Trump and the different laws like that, it all pertains to the whole big thing, and all lives matter. That's why they came up with all lives matter. Obviously, it don't protect all of the lives, and I don't even understand why they made that movement, because if the laws did protect it, why would they make the movement all lives matter? You know what I'm saying? That comes to tell you too, whites, Hispanics, blacks, and other races also died too of this tragic thing. I had a friend that died from police brutality, so I definitely know how it feels.
Exactly. Thank you. All right, our third panelist today is Kiera Lofton, a sophomore here at Virginia State University, majoring in hospitality management. Kiera, can you please share your position with us?
I can. First, I want to say Black Lives Matter. Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, and Sonny Bland, just to name a few people that have been killed by police brutality. So before I start, I want to say there are 3 main points that I'll be going over. Black Americans are not qualified to speak for other people of color. We as black people can only tell other people how we have lived as black people. We don't know how other minorities live. We shouldn't have to take on the responsibility of others. And this point leads to another article named Stop Making Black People Fight Everyone's Battles. It talks about all the different minorities and how they rely on us to speak for them, but that's not possible. I Can't Breathe, Hands Up, and Black Lives Matter are all statements developed in reaction to recent deaths of Eric Gardner. And he was an unarmed black man that was strangled to death, and he said, "I can't breathe" 11 times. 11 times. 2 racial scholars, activists, and many community members, these preventable deaths were only 2 recent examples of stark racial injustices that have plagued our country's history. Moreover, despite the media's disproportionate focus on cases involving men, intersectional analysis demonstrate that racialized police violence and misconduct are inflicted upon women and transgender persons of colors as well. Being black in America is already has negative implications in every aspect. White lives are already inherently valued over black lives. We assert that racism as a social condition is a fundamental cause of health and illness. Health disparities discrimination, and residential segregation are all byproducts of segregation, and they are all related to racism, but they don't realize that they're not helping.
Thank you, Kiera. We'll now hear from our final panelist, Tay Thompson, another senior here at Virginia State University from Brooklyn, New York, majoring in criminal justice. Tay, can you please tell us your position?
So pretty much I just want to say, does Black Lives Matter or does all lives matter? This has been the cause of many debates and conversations across America recently since 2012 with the whole Trayvon Martin incident. So pretty much Black Lives Matter operates under the assumption of the movement that isn't needed in America because it's post-racial society. So with the race theory and racial information in the United States and the racist ideology in the pre and post civil rights era, you know, so with the whole Black Lives Matter thing, it's colorblindness with that. So the colorblindness has on the United States criminal justice system and the all lives matter response. So with this, it explains that Black Lives Matter is important and suggests the next step that can be taken by Black Lives Matter movements to reach new goals of social justice for Black lives, the same way that Black people die and get national attention. Why can't white people or Hispanic people or Asians get that same attention? You know, in an article that I read, it's statistics show, so it says that 70% of people said Black people committing crimes against other Black people is a bigger problem in the African American community than it is police violence towards African American or Black people, since the whole Black Lives Matter thing. So it's kind of true, because you see more African Americans killing African Americans than white people killing Black people, or just like the whole police brutality. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a white cop or a Black cop. You know, wrong is wrong and right is right. You know, so I just think that they need to bring more media attention to other races, because there's white people that are getting killed by police. There are Asians getting killed by police. You know, it doesn't get publicized as much as Black people, and it should, because we're all a minority at the same time. You know, so that's one thing I believe. And then also another thing I want to say, not like the Blue Lives Matter, but I mean, Blue Lives does matter, because you have these police officers that go out every day to do their job, to protect and serve. It's not their intentions to go out, oh, I'm going to kill a Black person today. It's just unfortunate circumstances that it happens. Or we could say, what about Green Lives Matter? Which that's not a thing, but Green Lives Matter is something I thought about, like, what about the people in the military, the Army, the Navy, Air Force? These people go out and fight daily for the country, and they get blown up to pieces, shot and killed on a regular, just for doing what they're supposed to do, what they're paid to do. But they don't get national attention about that either. So that's my whole thing on it. So does Black lives really matter, or does all lives matter?
Thank you, Tay, for that point of view. Kiera, I'd like to come back and ask you a couple of questions. Number one, how do you feel people in general should react to police brutality?
Well, I feel like, me personally, I would say I'm kind of used to it, because I see it daily. But people in general, I feel like everybody, whoever gets killed, there's somebody's relative, there's somebody's mom, dad, uncle, cousin, whatever. But it's like we all react, I feel like all the Black community reacts the same. We all are pretty much used to it, but we're still trying to fight for the police not to kill us. So I feel like we should be sad about it, but we should all still come together and rise and make everything better.
All right, and one more. Do you personally feel that law enforcement is concerned with your well-being?
I feel like with law enforcement, it depends on the person. because there are some, I would say there are some good cops and there are some bad cops. They are put on out in the world to do their job. They are paid to do what they do. So I feel like some of them do care about people, some of them don't. So I feel like that's just by the person.
Right, thank you. And back to Tay, do you have a rebuttal?
A rebuttal for the question that she just said.
Just your rebuttal.
Yeah, kind of. So another article that I've seen is called "The Backlash Against Black Lives Matter" is more evidence of injustice, according to theconversation.com. So with that, it says that in white command social orders about any interest in fairness by non-white individuals is met by a kickback from a white victimhood. So then it also states that this is a valid excuse, like it's a valid reason for the Black Lives Matter, as it was for like the social liberties of development. 21% of Republicans has positive prospects of the development, and the figures of 18% among the individuals who voted in favor of President Trump. The interim percentage of that is 65% of Democrats and 66% of the individuals who voted in the favor of the Democratic presidential candidate, Ms. Hillary Clinton, boasted the development which jumped up the decision in the 2016 election when she was running against Trump. So it challenges a few police shootings of dark individuals and more extensive disappointment in the criminal equality of the framework. And then last year, the police shot 930 people, and the vast majority were armed or violently resisting arrest, according to the Washington Post. So whites made up approximately 49.9% of those victims, and 26% of the victims were actually black. So once again, I ask, does Black Lives Matter or does white lives matter?
Or all lives, exactly. Thank you, okay, and I have just a couple of questions for you, and I want to touch back to something that you said earlier, which I think is very interesting and very relevant to this side of the argument. That we currently have, there seems to be an ideology that we're in a post-racial society.
Right.
Do you feel that America has resolved the issue of racism?
I don't feel like that because basically to me, the colorblind ideology is like, it would be the perfect solution to inequality, but in reality, it's not. This colorblindness ideology it contributes to the systematic issue through the criminal justice system that caused the desperate racial impacts to manifest the whole movement. So to me, it's like colorblindness is like the new racism post-civil rights movement.
Exactly.
So it's it's still connected to the Black Lives movement, and it's still negative, as it was back in the 1960s when you had Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X still protesting. Even though there was like two separate ways, like one was positive and one is negative, we don't have nobody in our generation doing that, and it's still negative to this day. So racism is still like a big impact. And me as a black man, I'm supposed to be a threat to society because I'm African American, or because I have a beard, or my tone, or how I'm built, or just because of where I'm from, because I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So when people see that, the big black guy, like I'm scared, and I'm probably like one of the most nicest black guys you could ever meet. So I feel that racism is definitely a big problem to this day. I don't feel like it has decreased. I just feel like it's back in a new form, which is the colorblindness.
That's right. And what do you feel is something that we could do to improve our current race relations?
Something that we could do to improve, speak up. Everybody needs to get on one accord. Just the whole social economic class thing, oh, you're light skinned and fair skinned and I'm dark skinned, so you're uppity and I'm bougie, or I'm ghetto and you're bougie, you know, or like the white people, you know, they're white, so they're gonna get the good jobs, good credit scores, where black people, we don't have that. They all think that we're worthless, you know, and it shouldn't be like that. So like we all need to come together and be a whole, come together, be a team, you know. I'm no better than you, you're no better than me. That's just like back in the days, like the 1950s, where the woman, you know, back in the day, she would be considered the man or the Jezebel, and the man had to go out, and you know, it's still injustice because even today, men still get paid more than women for doing the same job. You get what I'm saying? So I think we all need to be equal. Nobody's better than the next person because of their sex, whether you're male, female, you know, or other however you identify, or because of your race.
That's right, I agree. I have a few questions that I'd like to pose to the audience. I'd like you to think about these. How many people watching have had their own personal experience with law enforcement in the past 3 years? And I want you to consider those encounters and ask yourself whether or not you felt completely safe during that encounter. And do you feel, as a citizen, that it is the responsibility of American citizens or American law enforcement to manage and de-escalate these situations when they arise? Or is it your responsibility as a citizen to maintain your calm and things like this to avoid death or injury? So, is the Black Lives Matter movement discriminatory against non-Black people? From what we've heard here today, as an organization formed for the specific purpose of protesting disproportionate brutality and mortality experienced by Black people at the hands of law enforcement, no. What we must combat are, rather than individual behaviors, ideologies. The ideologies of racism, the ideologies of colorism, the ideologies of sexism. They are all very much still alive and well. They may just go by a different name. So, I would like to thank you all in attendance for today for your participation, all my panelists and the audience. Thank you for sharing your research and your insight with us. While the ultimate goal is to surely eradicate police brutality, after the facts and figures presented today, I think we can all agree that on the population suffering it most taking priority. Now the question is, what are we as citizens supposed to do? Call it out, expose it. As the slogan goes, if you see something, say something. Advocate together to police the police. Thank you.